The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
This is the Giles and the Goalie podcast as part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. With your hosts, Giles Farrell and Ben Remington.
Welcome to the Giles and the Goalie podcast. We're back. We took a small summer hiatus. You might have noticed that, just to clear some cobwebs, recharge the batteries. I did none of those things because I had a full plate on my hands. I am your host, Giles Farrell. That laughing is the Reverend, Ben Remington.
Hello.
Who also had seemingly a full plate during our hiatus. So we really didn't get to recharge the batteries, but we're back nonetheless.
If anything, it just saved us from having to make up things about the Wild for, I don't know, what was it, like 5 weeks we were off?
Right. It saved you from such podcasts as comparing Wild players to wedding party people.
Oh, God. Yeah, one thing I'm sad that we missed out on, we never got around to watching Batman Forever and live podcasting it.
We can still do that down the road.
Yeah, someday.
We should have done that out of tribute to Joel Schumacher, who passed away.
Yes, we should have. R.I.P.
The opportunity, but yeah. So yeah, a brief summary about what went on during this hiatus. No, we didn't come up with anything new for this otherwise fine podcast. As we said, we had full plates. I, in turn, finally got married during the break. And as I mentioned, Reverend Remington here was the lovely officiant, did a bang-up job, was looking very dapper in the Mighty Ducks tie that he wore. He stayed true to the brand. Then I took a brief vacation, or otherwise known as a honeymoon. Now I'm back. So I'm ready to isolate here and settle in with sports, most notably hockey, which is right around the corner.
Yeah, it feels weird that like sports are actually going to happen in the next week. Like we've got baseball starting Thursday, and then hockey and basketball starting next week. And I don't even know what the day count is up to right now. It feels like a bazillion, but It's just weird after all of the discussion and all of the crap and all of the COVID that it's actually happening now.
Right. Do you have any summary of how your hiatus went, or not really?
Not really. Yeah, as you mentioned, it was not easy for me either, as I took a new job in Rochester, and there's been a lot that goes with that. And then, yeah, the preparation for officiating said wedding was mixed into there, along with, preparing to sell and buy a house. So that's what my summer has looked like.
Yes, and as I said, you did a very fine job. I could tell when we were about to start, you were a little nervous, but then I wasn't nervous at all, because I knew like once you started talking, like that's when you're just in the zone. So
yeah,
right. As soon as you went, you're just fine.
Yeah, no, I did feel a little bit nervous, just kind of because I peeked out from the side entrance where I kind of entered stage left, out of the view of the folks. And yeah, I did get a little bit nervous at first there. I had to tell myself that I've talked aimlessly like 240 some times now, so this really shouldn't be anything new. And luckily for me, I had a script with relatively large print prepared. So once I started talking, it was fine. Like I settled into a groove there after the first couple of lines, and I was good to go after that.
At least I didn't forget the 5-word lines that you were telling us.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Did I say that out loud? Whoops.
It's okay if you can't hear you.
She probably can actually.
Oh well.
Anyway. Yeah. So that's what we've been up to. But like we said, we're excited to. I mean, you can tell that just the tone of excitement here in my voice. We're excited to get back into hockey and see what happens here in the coming days and weeks with the Minnesota Wild, who made quite a bit of news, most notably just in the last week.
Mm-hmm.
Last Monday, to be exact. The first and foremost biggest news is that the Wild did finally sign Kirill Kaprizov, the guy you have been, not you, Ben, but you, the listeners,
Yes.
have been pining for so long. He finally signed his entry-level contract, and as pointed out, the Wild are burning that first year for the remainder of the 2020 season, and thus, since he's not eligible to play, he will only have 1 year starting 2020-2021 on that entry-level deal before he is a restricted free agent and will need a new contract. The Wild basically just saying, let's get him over here. And they're still working on getting him over here because now there's, go figure, visa issues.
Yeah, the classic visa issue. I don't know. It's good that they finally got it done, and certainly, burning the first year is not ideal. And I know there's been more than a handful of Wild fans that have been confused and or upset about that, but it's just what they had to do. And this kid isn't going to get to play in a game until, damn near December if we're lucky. And the KHL is already kind of getting in gear to fire up. They're already starting their training camps for the upcoming season, coming up here. So it's what they had to do. He had all the leverage in the world in this instance, and quite frankly, I think it was Dave Schwartz that mentioned it. It's just like, well, you're going to want to sign this kid to a decent sized deal as soon as you can anyway. So all this is really doing is just speeding up the process of hopefully getting, hopefully he pans out as good as advertised, and when he's an RFA or before he's even an RFA, you can get some kind of long-term deal done and try to keep him here for a significant part of his career, because I know a lot of people rightfully are very scared of him leaving relatively early, because that seems to happen in the state. But I think just getting the ball rolling, getting him stateside was priority number one.
Right. I guess I'm at the point where it doesn't affect me, and anything that prevents him from coming here just doesn't bother me. I've just gotten numb to the situation over these last 5 years, and I guess there's a little sense of relief that from everyone that he is signed and they're on the doorstep of getting him here in North America. It sounds like now the plan is, instead of getting him a visa for the United States, they're going to just get him a visa for Canada so he can quarantine there and then hook up with the team, because they're on the verge of heading up to Edmonton, the hub city where the Minnesota Wild are going to play the Vancouver Canucks in their play-in series. And we'll come back to that later. But I guess I'm still floored that this actually happened. I kind of had it in my mind that he was going to play another year in Russia and then come over then, just because he's going to wait until December. But seemingly, I'm guessing there was a pitch and sell made to him on, the big thing was the burning the first year of the entry-level contract, and then obviously getting him acclimated into North America, which is, never an easy thing for players coming over from Europe. So
Right.
just getting him in with the team and getting him adjusted, that seems to be a key that the Wild are working on. So I'm impressed, I got to say. Bill Guerin getting this over the finish line is a credit to him because he had two guys before him who couldn't. So
Right. So after watching D2 on your wedding day, I think I have an idea. We just put him in goalie pads, right?
Mm.
And then we can sneak him in, and he can take the shot as needed.
right.
We'll see if
There
that
you go.
works.
Yeah. The Wild should just actually do that with Alex Stalock, to be honest.
You don't need to invite him to shoot the puck.
But yeah, so that was the biggest news that happened on last Monday. But the first news that came on the last Monday was the Wild removed the interim tag of head coach Dean Evason, and I believe they extended him 2 more years, which was something that I had argued previously for on this podcast. And I can't remember because it's been so long and time is a flat circle, but what were your thoughts on stripping the interim tag off of the now permanent head coach?
I was against it, but only like in the realm that you haven't even explored any other options, and you've got such an extremely small sample size to judge Evason off of. And I know I'm not saying he didn't do a good job in those 12 games, but it was 12 games, and so that and I know we all hate the recycling process that is NHL head coaches, but at the same time, I do feel like there were some good coaches out there. I mean, guys like Gerard Gallant was out there, and I would have liked to see maybe a little more due process. I'm not upset with it. I'm more surprised by it, honestly, because Evason is very much not Guerin's guy. He was very, very much Paul Fenton's guy. So it's weird to see an incoming GM, of a first-year GM, rubber stamp a guy from the previous regime that was very much a previous regime guy. Like Dean Evason was very much Paul Fenton's guy. And for Guerin to come in and not even a year on the job yet, stamp him for his long term. That's surprising to me.
I wonder if it's more just of this is kind of a secondary problem right now for Bill Guerin. You've just got so many other things you need to worry about in the interim, and you've got a guy who probably deserves a look at being a head coach, so you might as well just lock him in for another year or two and figure out your other issues, getting Kaprizov here, getting a top line center, a goaltender for the future, blah blah blah. You're going to have a shortened off season. I wonder if that played a factor into it.
Yeah, it's entirely possible, and it could also be as simple as the guys who are available, the retreads. Guerin might not have been big on. Maybe Guerin doesn't think all that much of Gerard Gallant as a coach. Maybe he doesn't think a lot of who else is available that was big.
Laviolette.
Laviolette, yeah, that's right. So yeah, maybe it was as simple as that. But I think you're right. There is probably something to it with the goofy way that this return to play and then following next season is playing out. He might have just wanted to get something off of his plate as far as, hey, I don't want to worry about the head coaching thing for at least another off season. Seeing as how this off season is going to be a very weird one. So let's just give this guy a shot, see what he can do in a full season, even though, again, it's going to be a weird season. But see what he can do. And worst comes to worst, it's a complete dumpster fire and you fire him. I don't think there's a ton of risk there. But I understand the motives.
Just watch the Wild will get swept and then everyone will call for heads.
Well, no, everyone's going to be happy, right? Because then they're going to have that chance, that first overall pick.
See,
That's what all the fans want.
It's a win-win for Evason. Like, he can't do any wrong in this play-in series now. They get bounced right away, then they got a shot at the number 1 pick, and if they win, then everyone will say, Dean Evason, what a great job behind the bench.
I think there's going to be a fair amount of people that are going to be angry with him if they win the preliminary series. Again, not saying they're right. I'm just saying there's going to be people.
Right, people with deluded hope that the Wild would actually get the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, I don't know if they just don't remember how things go in this market, but this market has won a combined 1 lottery in the last 30 years of lotteries. So,
correct. So, that was quite a little stretch there for Evason, then Kaprizov. And man, that was all happening while I was on a flight to Jamaica. So that was not preferred, but
yeah,
I guess I was able to see it before we moved forward. What else did we have to talk about? We're out of sorts here. We need a training camp for us too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got to shake off the rust.
Yeah.
Are we in phase 2 or phase 3 right now? I don't even know.
Well,
we're probably in phase 1, I guess.
Yeah. Well, after the last 2 weeks, I think we're in phase 1, but my liver's up in phase 3. So.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Seasoned vet.
Yeah. It's I think I have to tone it down here in the next little bit just to build something back up. Yeah, the Wild are officially back in training camp now, and they've had some scrimmages. I don't know if you have been able to watch the scrimmages. It sounds like Alex Stalock is, as of this moment, the guy in line to be the starting goaltender for Game 1 in Vancouver. And it sounds like things just picked up where they left off, with at least with lines and pairings and whatnot with Dean Evason. So I don't know if you have any kind of general thoughts on the training camp that's happened thus far.
No, I haven't. I haven't been able to catch any of it. I've been so GD busy in the last couple of weeks with all this stuff happening in my life. But no, yeah, it sounds like business as usual, and I think that's a good thing, because the end of the season's so hot. I mean, obviously the couple of months off is going to throw a bucket of ice water on anything, but I'm glad to see they're not trying to overthink things, that Evason is just kind of sticking with what was working for him at the end of the season, and hoping that hoping that Stalock is still hot, and hoping that Fiala is still hot, and hoping that the lines that were kind of clicking a little bit are still clicking. So I think it's a good thing on the whole.
Yeah. I actually, just for tomorrow, I finished out my rewatch of the Wild Canucks regular season games on zone coverage, and Kevin Fiala was ridiculous in their last 2 meetings. So there's the hope that, as you said, they can pick up where he left off. And it sounds from, what reporters are saying from seeing him in training camp, he's got that same mentality approach that he showed when he was just lighting it up before the pause. So that's definitely a good sign. I really worry about Alex Stalock. A 5-month layoff is just that's a red alert for me. Even if he wins that competition out of training camp, that's my main concern. And as you'll read in that last game piece that I wrote, Devin Dubnyk was my player in that game. It was a 4-3 shootout win for the Wild, and he was literally average in that game, and the Wild won. And I made the point, it's like, Yeah, usually you don't give an award like this, player of the game, to a player who's average, but I'm giving it to him to prove a point that the Wild simply need average goaltending to win.
Yeah.
Because they have – I feel like they have enough depth at forward and at defense to beat the Canucks, and specifically at defense, because I feel like the Wild have some forwards who can absolutely exploit the Canucks' defense or lack thereof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and we probably talked about this before our break. I don't even remember at this point, but I think the Wild do match up fairly well with Vancouver as far as the fact that Vancouver is the quote unquote favorite, the 7 seed versus the 10 seed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Vancouver, you kind of, if you shut down Elias Pettersson, you kind of have him. You kind of have Vancouver really, up against a wall if you shut him down. Sure, Brock Besser is good, and he's someone you have to pay attention to as well. But I don't feel like they have quite the forward depth, and they definitely don't have the defense that the Wild have. And then it comes down to goaltending, and like you said, average goaltending I think is going to win the day for the Wild, especially because they definitely have the advantage for depth.
Yeah, and this is per Evolving Hockey, our friends Evolving Wild. The Canucks had the 7th worst goals against, or expected goals against per 60 minutes in the NHL this season. And I believe, if I remember right, the Wild had the upper hand in expected goals in 2 out of their 3 meetings, with the exception being the last one. So that's definitely that's got to be a point of attack for the Wild. Is you got to keep your foot on the gas against the Canucks defense, because they're not good at suppressing shots, and a guy like Fiala was clearly exploiting that in their regular season meetings, and they need that again here in their play-in series. Did I see this right? Is it just called the playoffs now? Like, did they drop that this is considered like regular season? It's just playoffs now?
There was a confusing wording to that, like, and it comes into play with some people's contractual bonuses and whatnot. So I think that they determined that the preliminary rounds are in fact playoffs, but something like they don't actually count for playoffs if it comes to somebody's contract. I don't know. There was some weird ruling about that.
There's
and now
more stipulations in that than the draft lottery.
Yeah, pretty much. They had to make it as confusing as possible. But yes, I think they are considering this whole return to play playoff, this whole tournament rather, as the playoffs. But there's some kind of weird exception to that. I don't remember what it was, and I don't think it applies to anything that would relate to the Wild. So,
okay, yeah, it's confusing. If somebody can explain this to us, like we're 5 years old, please be my guest. Yeah, I guess just back to the series, and we'll do more of a deep dive into this on next week's show, as we actually do a preview of the series. But, you said the Wild match up very well with Vancouver, and, I'm sure I've said this on previous podcasts when we're waiting for the return to play before he went on our hiatus and all that, but literally this is going to come down to goaltending. And if the Wild can get average goaltending, then I think they can win this series. So that's what it'll ultimately come down to. But like I said, we're gonna do more of a deep dive into that next week as we actually gear up for those games that'll actually happen in Edmonton. And boy, oh boy, was I excited to see that schedule come out and see 9:30 p.m. Central start times. If there's no delay from the game before.
Oh, I know, right? I know.
Imagine if there's like a marathon 4 overtime game to start the day.
Yeah, I don't understand, and I guess they've, can only do so much of it, but why are they not playing more day games? Like, everyone is either furloughed or unemployed or working from home or quarantined or whatever. I don't know. I feel like they could have used that a little bit more to their advantage. Maybe they're just afraid of running into baseball in that regard. I don't know. But it just feels like with as many games they're stuffing into such a short amount of time, feels like they probably could have done a little bit more of that.
Yeah, there's always a what if with the NHL.
Right.
There's never a good job.
No.
Except they are the only league that seemingly had it together when it comes to return to play and having everything settled. And I mean, hell, they even extended the collective bargaining agreement after all this. So
Yeah, that might have been the wildest news of the entire summer. The fact that there's going to be labor peace in the NHL for the foreseeable future. But I think it also, stemming from this too, I think it also is, I think both sides recognize that they're in a tough spot, and that, they saw what, at least hopefully they saw what happened with baseball, and they figured that they don't want to go down that path. And the deal they have right now, I think, the owners were always the ones that were crying wolf, but I think when it came down to it, the owners are like, yeah, you know what, we can deal with this for a little while. We'll pretend to not lose money for the next couple of years here and be happy with this. And the Olympic thing is huge. That I know we hadn't touched on that yet, but the fact that the owners are allowing the players to play in the Olympics pending a deal consummated with the IOC, that is awesome.
yeah, no, that's excellent news. And I really never had a doubt in my mind that the NHL was going to go to the 2022 Olympics in Beijing, but getting it in writing, I guess it's more of a collective relief for the players and the fans, and not to dog on the players who played in 2018, but that was just not the same, and that was kind of hard to watch.
Yeah,
at points. So except unless you're watching the Russian team, which was basically a bunch of professionals. It was like watching Olympic hockey before professionals were allowed to play, where the Soviets just ruled.
Yeah, before all the Soviets left for the NHL. So it was like watching Olympic hockey pre 1990.
Right. Actually, on my flight home, they had the Russian 5 documentary on the whatever you call it, the little TV you had in front of you.
Oh, nice.
Watch that. So that was pretty nice.
Was that an ESPN doc?
No, that was an independent doc done.
Oh, okay.
It was
cool.
It was. I don't know. I feel like that kind of picks up like right where the Red Army doc kind of tails off.
Makes sense.
It just basically chronicles the 5 Russians the Detroit Red Wings had on their team when they won the cup, and kind of goes over how they had to smuggle a couple of these guys actually out of the Soviet Union. So
right. Yeah.
It's fascinating. But anyway, what else did we have? We just kind of blew through everything here. We're just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could have talked about Kaprizov for even longer, because that's what the focus of everyone's life has been for the entire summer. But we kind of breezed through it quickly and then touched on Evason, and we were all good to go.
I mean, we have really talked about him ad nauseum on this podcast, so it's just like it's hard to, without actually having new content on him, or new, I guess, just like actually seeing him play. There's not a whole lot more you can say. It's a process now, and I guess I will say this: I did enjoy the tidbits that Jared Spurgeon reached out to him during the pause, trying to start making him feel welcome. I thought that was a good move, and I began my Jared Spurgeon for Captain Crusade on Twitter.com. And then also I did enjoy Marcus Foligno reaching out to him after he signed and he tried sending him something in Russian, and then he just commented on. He says, "Well, either he's gonna know what I'm saying, or I'm gonna look like an idiot." So I appreciated his candor in that. So he just used Google Translate. So
I mean, it was probably close. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how quickly Kaprizov acclimates to North America, because I know that can be difficult sometimes. But
right. And if he wants to go out and have some Russian vodka, like, I can certainly advise him where, and even offer to buy a few rounds with him. So
right,
I
yeah.
I do know the lay of the land
One thing,
when it's socially acceptable, of course.
yes, of course. Bars are not a good idea right now. One thing that we haven't touched on is all the testing, and I don't know if it makes you feel any better or worse about it, but it seems like so far through phase 3, things are going pretty well for the NHL. I think I forget the exact number of tests it was, but it was like 1,900 players and staff tested, and 2 positives came back.
Right.
So I think that's very encouraging. I know when everyone introduced these return to play bubble ideas, it was like, oh my God, what if one guy on a team gets it, and then it spreads like wildfire. And the same thing for MLB and NBA too. And it seems like all of the protocols that were put in place are working. The NBA had 0 tests, obviously a lot less people. And MLS, who's doing something similar, had 0 positive tests as well. And baseball, after an initial flood, obviously all the guys reporting that tested positive, there hasn't been as much since then. So are you feeling fairly confident that we're going to actually see this entire tournament play out, or is there still any doubt?
I mean, there's always a doubt, but I think there's a lot more optimism than there was, even a week ago. I mean, who knows? I mean, once you get Brad Marchand out there licking people, all bets are off. But
let's make just him wear a mask,
right,
on the ice, just him.
I mean, baseball players are doing it, so why not?
Right. Yeah.
There is a lot more optimism. I'm probably about 85% optimistic that they'll get all of this completed, which is, probably up from 50% a week ago. Actually, the Friday night of our rehearsal dinner, I did a radio spot, and I said I was 50-50 that they'll finish it. So, yeah, it is up about 35% for me.
Sure. Yeah, that
I
makes
still
sense.
can't believe I did that, by the way.
I'm still, I was more optimistic, and obviously this just kind of reinforces that. So we'll see how it plays out, and obviously there's a lot, but there's a reason why they chose Canada, because Canada has done a really good job of keeping COVID in check. So I mean, even if these guys do, they're not leaving the bubble, but even just any outside contact, which there undoubtedly is going to have, with how many, with the 24 teams all staying in 2 separate locations. I think that just the way that Canada has managed things so much better makes me feel a lot better for it. I think that hockey is at the least amount of risk of all of this. I mean, the NBA and the MLS are still in Florida, for Christ's sake. Like that's just seems like that's a lot more risky than what the NHL is doing up in Canada.
Right. I also feel like Canada just used this as an excuse to get rid of the Blue Jays. I'm just kidding. Yeah,
they've already killed off one baseball team.
The NHL was right to go with 2 Canadian cities, as Canada wants nothing to do with the United States right now. So it's just better for everyone to have it in Canada and keep them all contained. And I not to be, well, actually I am. It's probably better for just the coverage of the tournament, because I feel like there'll be more media covering this somehow, maybe more television cameras or whatnot, because if you say you have it in the US, I feel like there's probably less, Sportsnet cameras coming down and being in the arenas and stuff. So
Yeah, sure.
I feel like that's just from a broadcast perspective. I feel like there will be some advantages to that. Although I will say I'm disappointed that there's going to be a 5-second delay on the game feed because they just got somebody sitting on the dump button, which I want the unedited feed. That's
yeah,
what I want.
I don't. I've never. I mean, not to say that we need to go full on uncensored on all American television or anything like that, but with the severity and kind of the context and quite frankly the volume of any obscenities you might hear coming from the ice in hockey, I don't see it as that big of a deal. You're going to hear a little bit of it, and I don't know. It just I never understood that why they're so terrified of that.
It just my point. I guess it just goes to the point of hockey fans know what gets said on the ice. Like nobody,
Right.
Gonna be whoa. They say "f you." What is this?
Right.
Everyone knows what they're saying, and so I don't know. I guess maybe from a league perspective, there's just a worry somebody's gonna say something that comes over as offensive, and then there's a whole backlash from that. So that's probably why, to be honest, because
I'm sure.
there is a demand for the unedited feeds, but whatever, I guess.
Well,
Yeah. See, I had something else to say. Yeah, I did a thing a few weeks ago on how the NHL could, improve their broadcasts, during this because, they're really in a weird situation. There's no fans. You're obviously going to have way more people tuned into this watching on TV. And so you might as well try some things with this. And yeah, they're probably not going to do that anyway.
no.
But I felt like it's worth trying, giving fans more, like alternative views of the ice. And, like we just talked about, having a feed where you just have the unedited sounds of the game. You don't have announcers. You just hear, everything that's going on the ice. And then I took a page out of like, what you see in, like the big events, like all-star games or stadium series, and even in NHL 20, they have special commentators. Snoop Dogg is in freaking NHL 20. Like, have more special commentators, like get Bruce Boudreau in the booth or, on the microphone or wherever, have people like that. And I just think there's a whole new world that they can explore with these broadcasts. And it sounds like they're just going to, amp up the advertisements around the rink, which great.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yay.
I know.
That's exciting.
I need to see, bigger advertisements for Enterprise. Why not?
You know what they should do? They should mic up both goalies.
Oh, you
for
know
the
what?
whole game.
They used to do that in All-Star games. I miss that. Like,
Yeah.
goalies are weirdos, and they should always be mic'd up anyway.
Yeah, they're entertaining. That's how that works.
Right. They're entertaining. Okay. Yeah. Do you got anything else on the NHL return to play?
No, I think I'm glad that it's almost here, and obviously, like you said, we'll break down the Vancouver series a little bit more in depth next week. But yeah, it's finally happening. We didn't talk about the NHL draft that happened while we were gone too. Not that anything needs to be talked about except for just a lot of uproarious laughter that the NHL will be giving the number one overall pick to a pseudo playoff team.
Yeah, and as we kind of hit on it, but there's just this false hope from Wild fans that they're gonna get the number one pick. So
yeah, I mean it does. If that were that 1 in a million chance were to happen, I mean, it does really supercharge their rebuilding efforts. Really, I mean, when you're looking at if you've got Fiala, Kaprizov, and Alex Lafreniere, I mean, that's pretty damn good. And there's still some things you have to address with this team, like goaltending. But
Right.
I understand the eternal optimism. I just don't think that fans should really rely on that to the point where they're rooting against their team in this playoff. Like, they're there. I don't know. I don't see them winning the lottery anyway.
Yeah. No, I don't either. And sorry if that just were negative, but honestly, there's never been hope with them.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I hate to be that guy, but no,
Mhm.
the 5-week layoff didn't make us more optimistic or anything.
Nope.
So
Sure didn't.
Yeah, I don't know. That we can probably maybe just call that a show, and we can
Mhm.
do our homework for next week, and come back with a jammed pack preview of the Wild Canucks, and maybe go over the other series that'll take place, and
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe even do some with jerseys just for the hell of it, but we'll
Why
see.
not?
Maybe even open up the mailbag, I guess. We'll see what happens. We're just getting back into the swing of things here, so yeah, look forward to next week. Like I said, we're really going to try and hammer down the analysis for the series, because it's moderately large. Don't know if you know that,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. So we'll call it a show. You can follow Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. Our podcast is at GATG Wild Podcast. You can find the written works at zonecoverage.com/wild. And you can download this podcast there, or you can go to iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, anywhere really you listen to podcasts. We're there. So that will wrap it up for us this week. And when I say this, I actually mean it. We will talk to you again next week.
Later.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Gill and the Goaltender podcast.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.